The bell above the door gave a tired jingle as the man stepped inside, boots damp from the slush still melting off the Chicago sidewalks. The scent of sizzling bacon, burnt coffee, and lemon floor cleaner wrapped around him like a memory that refused to let go. Bridgeview Diner was packed, noisy forks on ceramic, sports talk on the corner TV, laughter rising from booth number 6. But nobody looked up. Nobody paused, because to them, he was just another guy. Hoodie pulled low, beard unshaved, shoulders heavy with road dust. They didn't recognize Desmond Hale, the 41-year-old CEO who had built this diner chain from a one-room lunch counter into a multi-city brand. And that's exactly how he wanted it. He hadn't come for applause or attention. He hadn't even planned to come at all until the red flags started piling up. Quiet resignations, an unexplained dip in profits, a voicemail from a former server that simply said, "You need to see what your place has become." Now he was here, sliding into the corner seat at the far end of the counter like a shadow with purpose. No assistant, no suit, just questions that needed answers. And somewhere in this room, hidden between the smiles and steam trays, was a truth he couldn't afford to ignore. He just didn't know yet how far it would go, or how much it would cost him to fix. A gust of February wind slammed the glass door as he stepped in. The old diner bell jangled weakly overhead, drowned out by the clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversations that filled Bridgeview Diner like static. Nobody looked up, not the waitress pouring coffee with robotic precision, not the couple arguing quietly in booth 3, not even the manager pacing behind the counter, eyes glued to a clipboard. Desmond Hale, 41, paused just inside the entrance. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a tired glow over cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus smudged with fingerprints. It was all so familiar and yet utterly foreign. This was the flagship, his first, the diner that had launched his empire. Now it didn't even know his face. His boots were still damp from the half-melted snow outside, leaving faint prints on the checkered tile floor. He tugged his hoodie lower, shoved his hands into the pockets of a thrift store windbreaker, and moved like someone who didn't want to be seen. In truth, he didn't. Not yet. He slid onto the far left stool at the counter, the one with a chipped corner he'd never let them fix. From here, he had a clear view of everything. The kitchen pass-through window, the register, the server's entrance, and the booths by the windows. Strategic positioning. Years in boardrooms had taught him where power sits, even when pretending to have none. A waitress, young, distracted, muttered, "You need a menu?" without making eye contact. Desmond shook his head. Turkey melt, black coffee. He roughened his voice slightly, like a man who hadn't slept well and didn't want to talk. She scribbled, nodded, walked away. He took a slow breath. This place used to buzz with energy, intentional energy. Smiles meant something. Teamwork pulsed like a rhythm behind the counter. Desmond had trained his earliest employees himself. This diner had been his gospel, but now something felt off. The coffee machine sputtered near the prep line, orders were barked, but there was no rhythm, just noise. The staff moved like mismatched gears, jerky, uncoordinated. Desmond's eyes tracked everything. A tray left unattended for too long, a regular customer ignored for minutes, the manager scribbling into her notebook but never looking up. No one was smiling, no one seemed proud. And then he saw him. In the back, half obscured behind the industrial sink, stood an elderly man in a soaked apron. Shoulders hunched, hands red from hot water, arms moving with calm, practiced rhythm. He scraped dishes, stacked trays, wiped down counters, all without breaking his flow. Harold, his name tag said. There was something dignified about the way he moved, like he belonged here more than anyone else. Desmond sipped his coffee, bitter, burned. No one cared. But Harold did. As a young waitress stumbled, nearly losing a tray of glasses, it was Harold who caught it. Steady hands, gentle voice. "Easy there, sweetheart. You're good." Desmond watched in silence. The diner he built had changed, shifted, hardened. He didn't know it yet, but so had the battle ahead. He had come for answers. He'd leave with a reckoning. The lunch rush hit hard. Steam rose in ghostly spirals from the griddle as orders flew. patty melts, BLTs, triple stack pancakes at noon. Waitresses weaved between tables like overworked dancers, balancing plates on instinct alone. The register pinged with every sale, a hollow sound that felt more like a warning bell than success. Desmond stayed put, a ghost in plain sight. But his eyes never stopped moving. He wasn't just watching, he was hunting the truth. And his gaze kept drifting back to Harold. The old man never stopped. His apron was soaked through at the waist, stained from hours of scrubbing pans and catching other people's messes. But there was grace in his rhythm. Every movement was deliberate, scrape, rinse, stack, repeat, like a man who understood that dignity wasn't something you were given. It was something you earned, even in the shadows. Desmond sipped the burnt coffee again and leaned slightly, catching snatches of conversation behind the counter. "Harold's still here," a waitress muttered, half joking. "He probably lives here," replied the younger cashier, a smirking blonde named Brent. "Might as well put his name on a booth." "No joke," said Kayla, the other cashier. "Did you see him slip cash to that woman last week?" Single mom. Short on her tab, like it's his job to bail everyone out. Brent laughed. "Guy's probably broke himself. He drives that beat-up Buick from 1998. I swear I saw duct tape on the door." Desmond felt his jaw tighten, but he kept listening. Harold, meanwhile, didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. Maybe he couldn't hear them. Or maybe he just didn't care. But Desmond did. He watched as Harold gently greeted each customer that passed the dish window, remembering names, asking after their families. He watched the small nods from elderly guests and quiet thumbs-ups from busboys who were half Harold's age. Respect lived in the little things. And this man, he was the only one still carrying the soul of this diner. Then something happened. A young woman approached the counter with 2 kids in tow. Her clothes were clean but threadbare. She opened her wallet, frowned, whispered something to Kayla. Desmond saw the embarrassment on her face before she spoke. I'm short a few dollars. I didn't realize prices went up." Kayla didn't bother to lower her voice. "Yeah, well, you can't order food you can't pay for." Brent sauntered over. "Here we go again. Got another charity case, Harold." The sarcasm hit like a slap. But Harold didn't respond with anger. He dried his hands slowly, walked to the register and pulled a few bills from his back pocket. He placed them on the counter, quiet, without ceremony. The woman nearly burst into tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back, I swear." "No rush," Harold said gently. "Just get the kids home safe." The 2 cashiers exchanged a glance. Not gratitude, annoyance. "That's the 3rd one this week," Brent muttered. "He's gonna go broke saving strays." Desmond's fingers curled around his coffee mug, not from rage, from clarity. There were problems in this place, and Harold Lawson, quiet, tired, and kind, was about to become their scapegoat. But not if Desmond had anything to say about it. The next afternoon, the clouds hung low over Chicago like a ceiling waiting to collapse. Inside Bridgeview Diner, the mood matched the sky. Heavy, grey, thick with something unsaid. Desmond was back, same booth, same hoodie. But today the tension clung to the walls like grease smoke. The lunch rush had passed. A few regulars lingered, one reading the Tribune, another typing furiously on a laptop, earbuds in. Waitresses wiped down booths. The air smelled of old fries and fading lavender cleaner. And at the end of the counter, Brent and Kayla leaned in close, whispering. Desmond sipped his lukewarm coffee and opened a folded newspaper, not to read, but to listen. "I checked his file," Brent said, voice low but sharp. "Old man's been here 7 years. 7, washing dishes, no raises, no perks." Kayla scoffed. "What kind of loser stays a dishwasher for 7 years? Like, congrats, you mastered soap and sponges." "Yeah, and he keeps handing out money to anyone with a sob story," Brent added. "Single mums, teenagers, that old guy with dementia last week. He acts like he's running a damn church." Kayla glanced toward the dish station. Harold was there, as always, quiet, steady, back slightly hunched. "Bet he lives in that car of his," Kayla whispered. "You've seen it, right? The Buick with the mismatched door. I'm surprised it even starts." Brent grinned. "Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he sleeps behind the diner." Desmond felt his throat tighten. These weren't just ignorant remarks. There was venom in them. A quiet, simmering resentment, the kind that didn't come from boredom. It came from entitlement. And then the twist. "You heard Patricia this morning," Brent said. "She's breathing down our necks about the register shortages." "She doesn't know it's us," Kayla replied quickly. "Not yet," Brent said, leaning in even closer. "But think about it. Harold's always around when the drawer comes up short. He's slipping in cash, trying to be the hero. She already suspects him." Kayla's eyes flickered with something new. Possibility. Brent smiled. "So what if the drawer comes up short again? Say, tomorrow, same time. But this time, we make sure she sees him near the register." "You want to frame him?" Kayla asked, barely a whisper. "He's old, broke, weird. No one will question it." There was a beat of silence. Then Kayla said, "Patricia already thinks the cameras don't work." "Exactly. We control the narrative." Desmond's pulse thudded in his ears. He forced himself to stay still, to not slam his hands on the table, to not end it now. Because he needed more: proof, witnesses, timing, and above all, truth. Across the diner, Harold handed a clean plate to a cook with a quiet nod. He hadn't heard a word of it. But Desmond had. He hadn't come to Bridgeview for drama or revenge. He'd come for clarity. But now it was war. The kind waged in shadows, in subtle glances, in cruel little jokes whispered between shifts. He folded his paper, tapped the table twice, and made a silent vow they'd picked the wrong man to corner the wrong soul. Tomorrow, the trap would be theirs. It was nearly midnight when Desmond trailed the Buick down the empty side streets of South Chicago, headlights off, heart heavy. The city had quieted, the snow-slicked roads reflecting orange glow from halogen street lamps. Still, the car in front of him moved cautiously, like it carried the weight of someone who knew every wrong turn could cost more than just time. Harold's Buick turned off the main road, bumping down a narrow gravel path between an abandoned laundromat and a fenced-off construction site. At the end of the lane, tucked behind a stack of forgotten shipping crates, sat a rusted trailer, the kind even city inspectors gave up on. Desmond parked across the street, engine idling. He watched Harold slowly exit the car, stretching his back with the ache of a man used to pain. The old man ascended the creaking steps, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of exhaustion. A single porch bulb flickered above the door as he pushed it open. Dim yellow light spilled out for a moment, then vanished as the door clicked shut. Desmond leaned back in his seat. He wasn't just angry, he was ashamed. The CEO of a company with 8-digit annual revenue had just watched one of his oldest, most loyal employees retreat into a metal box barely big enough to stand in. And he had never known. The next morning, Desmond took a detour, not to the diner, but to Greta Livingston, a retired server who'd worked alongside Harold before a hip replacement forced her out. Her home smelled of cinnamon and menthol rub. The moment she saw Desmond, still in disguise, she narrowed her eyes. "You're not here for coffee," she said. "No," Desmond replied softly. "I'm here about Harold." Greta's expression softened. "I figured something was wrong." They sat across her kitchen table while she filled in the gaps. "He lost his wife 5 years ago, Martha. Cancer. He sold their house to cover her treatment, every last penny. Didn't even fight the hospital bills. Said if she got one more day, it was worth it." Desmond nodded slowly, jaw tight. "His daughter begged him to come live in Denver," Greta continued, "but Harold wouldn't go. Said he didn't want to be a burden. Said he'd rather work with dignity than live with charity. So he took the dish job. It was the only place that would hire him, and he's been loyal ever since." Desmond looked down at his hands. Calluses had long faded, replaced by handshakes and stock options. But Harold? Harold never stopped giving. Quietly, relentlessly. Greta leaned forward. "But something's off lately. He's thinner, limps more. I think he's skipping meals. And," she hesitated, "they're tearing down that trailer park next month. He hasn't told anyone yet." Desmond stood, thanking her. As he stepped back into the cold, one thought echoed in his mind like thunder. This is my responsibility. He wasn't just going to expose 2 petty employees, he was going to fix everything they thought was too broken to save. The trap had to be perfect. No cameras, no advance warning, just enough rope for them to hang themselves. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Desmond was back at Bridgeview Diner, seated at his usual booth near the pastry case. A fresh layer of snow blanketed the sidewalk outside, masking the tension building within. Today, the air was tighter. Everyone moved a little faster, smiles a little thinner, conversations clipped at the edges, and in the middle of it all, Harold. Same soaked apron, same gentle hands, same quiet dignity. But today would be different. Desmond had made a call the night before. Through a local outreach center, he'd connected with Tanya Jenkins, a single mother of two who had once received help from Harold without ever knowing his name. She agreed to return, this time with a plan. At precisely 10:17 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. Tanya entered, holding the hand of her youngest daughter, Mia, a bright-eyed girl in a patched pink jacket. Their presence turned no heads, just two more faces in a diner full of strangers. They ordered modestly a grilled cheese and tomato soup for Mia, a coffee for Tanya. The staff barely glanced at them. Desmond watched from the shadows, heart beating steadily. 20 minutes later, Tanya approached the register. Her voice was soft, laced with guilt. I'm short. I thought I had enough. My card got locked yesterday." Kayla's face twisted with mock concern. "Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe plan better next time." Brent swooped in like a vulture. "Unless, of course, our in-house charity wants to cover it again." He turned toward the dish pit. "Harold, got another mouth for you to feed." The insult landed like a slap across the room. Customers looked up from their meals. Tanya's eyes welled with shame, but she held her ground. From behind the steam and trays, Harold appeared, wiping his hands. He didn't ask questions, didn't flinch, just stepped forward and pulled two wrinkled bills from his wallet. "Let the little girl eat," he said softly, placing the money on the counter. "We all need help sometimes." Desmond's hand gripped his coffee mug tighter. That moment, quiet, humble, was the one Brent and Kayla would twist into a lie. 10 minutes later, as Tanya left with Mia and a quiet, "Thank you," Brent turned to Patricia, the manager. "We've got a problem," he said, loud enough to turn heads. "I think we're short again." Patricia looked up from her ledger. "How much?" $20. And guess who was at the drawer just now?" Kayla chimed in, full of fake sympathy. I saw Harold near it, right after that woman left. I didn't want to say anything, but this is the third time." Desmond felt the diner go still. Here it was, the performance. The moment they weaponized kindness as theft. Patricia's brow furrowed. "Harold, are you sure?" "I don't want to accuse anyone," Brent said, "but we've got to be realistic." As Patricia approached the dish station, Desmond stood. He stepped into the light, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You won't need to ask questions." Every head turned. Even Harold froze. Desmond pulled off his hoodie. His presence shifted the room. "I already have the answers." Silence crashed over the diner like a wave. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the low sizzle from the grill seemed to hush itself. Brent blinked. Kayla took a half step back. Patricia stared at the man standing before them, no longer slouched in disguise, no longer just another customer nursing bitter coffee. He stood tall now, shoulders squared. Hoodie gone. Beneath it, a charcoal wool sweater tailored to someone who'd once closed a $20 million deal between flights. The same man who now looked at them not as a stranger, but as the man who built the place. "Mr. Hale," Patricia whispered, eyes widening, "I had no idea you were in town." Desmond didn't flinch. That was the point. He turned toward the entire room, employees, customers, cooks, halfway through plating breakfast. "My name is Desmond Hale. I founded Bridgeview Diner 15 years ago with one mission: treat customers like family and treat employees like they matter. But over the past 3 days, I've watched something else grow here." He looked at Brent, at Kayla, then slowly at Harold, who stood at the edge of the kitchen, confused, his hands still wet from the sink. "And it ends today." Desmond reached into his coat and pulled out a small black remote. With a flick, the flat screen mounted above the counter came to life. Everyone turned. On the screen, a high-resolution video feed. Crystal clear, dated and time-stamped, it showed Brent deliberately miscounting change, pocketing small bills. Kayla voiding transactions when customers weren't looking. Audio kicked in, enhanced and undeniable. "If we frame Harold for stealing," Brent's voice said, "Patricia'll fire him. My cousin gets in. We split the bonus." Gasps broke out across the room. Someone stood from their booth. A waitress dropped a spoon. Desmond clicked again. Now Harold appeared, quietly slipping his own cash into the register for customers who couldn't afford their meals. No speeches, no grandstanding, just quiet mercy. The screen paused on his weathered hands, placing a $5 bill down. Desmond turned back to Patricia. "You thought the cameras were broken. That was intentional. I approved hidden backups 3 days ago. I wanted to see who'd act differently when they thought no one was watching." Brent tried to speak, something between a denial and a plea, but Desmond raised a hand, silencing him with the precision of a judge delivering a verdict. "You tried to tear down a man who gave more than either of you ever will. And for what? A bonus? A power trip?" Kayla's mascara streaked as she began to cry. Brent looked like a balloon mid-deflation, rage, shame, and panic all collapsing inward. Desmond turned to Harold. "You shouldn't have to defend your integrity, but I will." A squad car pulled up outside. 2 officers entered, guided by a nod Desmond had given hours earlier. Brent made a move for the back exit, but 2 line cooks stepped in his way, arms crossed. "You're not going anywhere," one of them said. As Brent and Kayla were cuffed and led outside, the diner remained quiet. Then came the applause. Slow, growing, relentless. Harold stood frozen, eyes glistening behind fogged glasses, disbelief written across every line of his face. And Desmond, arms folded, voice steady, said only this: "Justice doesn't need volume, it just needs timing." The next morning, the sky above South Chicago opened in rare blue. Sunlight spilled through the frosted windows of Bridgeview Diner, warming the polished countertops and the faces of those who had returned, not just for breakfast, but for something far more meaningful. The scent of fresh coffee and baked cinnamon rolls wrapped the room like a welcome-back hug. But the real warmth came from the quiet hum of change. Desmond arrived early. No entourage, no clipboard, no conference call. Just him, in a navy sweater, sleeves rolled, ready to work. Harold was already there, as always, but this time he didn't head straight for the dish pit. He hovered near the front, unsure. When Desmond approached, he offered a cautious nod. "Mr. Hale." Desmond smiled. "It's Desmond, and I was hoping you'd join me in the office for a moment." They walked together, slow and steady, past curious glances and whispered greetings. Inside the small back office, Desmond gestured to a chair and set a thick folder on the desk. "I spent most of last night going over policies, practices, mistakes," he began, "but more than that, I've been thinking about you." Harold looked down, hands folded in his lap. "You've given this place more than time," Desmond continued. "You've given it its heart, and I've been blind to it. So I want to fix that, starting now." He opened the folder, revealing a formal contract. "Effective immediately, I'm offering you the position of Community Operations Manager. Better hours, full benefits, a salary that honors your work. You'll be helping train staff across all locations on what this place was built on: respect, humility, and service." Harold blinked slowly. I never went to college. I've never managed anyone." "You've managed to inspire an entire room every day for 7 years, Desmond said. "That's more leadership than most people ever learn." He reached for a second envelope and slid it forward. Harold hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a deed, a photo of a small, freshly painted home just 3 blocks away. A gift, no rent, no strings, just peace. You deserve to rest somewhere with heat, dignity, and a door that doesn't stick. Harold's hands trembled. "Mr. Hale, You've earned it," Desmond interrupted softly. "Every dollar, every moment." Harold sat in silence, tears welling. It was the silence of a man who had carried burdens so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to put them down. Outside the office, the energy was shifting. Patricia was retraining the remaining staff, this time under Desmond's direct oversight. A poster had gone up behind the register. Bridgeview is rebuilding, and everyone deserves a second chance, except those who try to take yours away. Customers returned not just for food, but to shake Harold's hand, to thank him. A jar labeled the Harold Lawson Fund had already filled halfway. Donations meant not for him, but for others who needed the kind of help he once gave in silence. The dishwasher was no longer invisible. And Desmond, he was no longer absent. Together, they weren't just reopening a diner, they were restoring its soul. Bridgeview Diner was never meant to be a palace, no marble floors, no celebrity chefs. Just a corner of the city where warmth lived in the scent of grilled rye and the hush of a kind voice saying, "Take your time." But after everything that happened, after the lies, the theft, the quiet heroism, the diner became something else entirely. It became a symbol. Within a week, word spread far beyond South Chicago. Local newspapers picked up the story. Customers posted videos of Harold wiping down booths as strangers thanked him like a war hero. A food blogger called him the soul every brand claims to have, but rarely earns. But Harold didn't change. He still arrived early, though now he wore a collared shirt under a soft fleece vest instead of a damp apron. He still mopped when no one asked him to. Still learned the names of customers by their second visit. Still paused to tie a child's shoelace or carry a hot plate for a server running behind. And Desmond? He stayed, gone were the days of high-rise boardrooms and remote delegation. Every week, he visited a different Bridgeview location, not as the man in charge, but as the man in service. Listening, watching, fixing what needed to be fixed, not just on paper but in spirit. And every Friday, without fail, he sat at Harold's counter, ordered the same thing, turkey melt, black coffee, and they talked, about nothing, about everything. One morning, after the rush, Harold looked out the window where sunlight danced through drifting snow and said quietly, "You know what gets me?" Desmond looked up from his coffee. "I spent years thinking no one noticed," Harold said, "that all the little things I did didn't matter. That kindness wasn't currency anymore." Desmond's reply was soft but certain. "It is. You just don't always see the return right away." Harold nodded, the truth of it sinking deep. Because that was the lesson. In a world rushing toward profit, status, and noise, the quiet moments, the ones where you reach into your pocket not because you have enough, but because someone else has less, are the ones that hold power. It wasn't the confrontation that changed the diner. It was compassion. It wasn't Desmond's title that made the difference. It was his willingness to see. And it wasn't Harold's position that defined his legacy. It was the way he chose dignity, again and again, even when no one clapped. True character isn't forged in spotlight, it's built in silence, in dish pits, in whispered thank yous, in actions taken when no one's watching. The final tally wasn't in quarterly reports or social media reach. It was in the eyes of the people who walked through the door and felt something different, something human. And as Desmond poured the last of his coffee and watched Harold greet a new customer by name, he knew this wasn't just about one diner. It was about every place and every person that gets overlooked, until someone decides they matter, and never let them be invisible again. If this story moved you, if Harold's quiet strength and Desmond's awakening reminded you that dignity isn't defined by status, but by action, then don't let it end here. Because somewhere right now, there's someone just like Harold, working in silence, giving without recognition, and holding a broken system together with nothing but heart. And there's someone like Desmond too, ready to do the right thing. They just need to see it first. So share this story, talk about it. Let it echo beyond the walls of a single diner. And ask yourself, are you watching closely enough to see the Harolds around you? Because the world doesn't just change with outrage, it changes with observation, compassion, and courage to act when no one else will. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that cut deeper than headlines, and share this with someone who still believes in doing good, even when no one's watching. We'll see you in the next one.